All right, welcome in to another episode of Buzz Beat. We are live currently on Twitter, on YouTube. Thank you for joining us for another episode. If you're listening live or in one of your podcast feeds later on this week, this is Brian Geising, and today I will be joined by Lee Branscombe, who it's very good to see. I've not done a pod here with Lee in a little while now, actually, but the Hornets, of course, have some preseason basketball starting up this week with the first game taking place Tuesday, October 10th. That's about a little under 24 hours from when we're doing this right now down in Miami. And on today's episode, before that game against the Heat, we'll be chatting about some over and under prop bets and using those as sort of like a launching pad to get into some other topics of conversation for the season. But before we get to any of that, Lee, allow me to have the opportunity to finally, for the first time in a few weeks, one, record a podcast with you, and also, B, more importantly, allow you to wish you a congratulations to you and the wife. I guess newly married, or do you feel like you've now been married for a long time? Now that you're 21 days into the endeavor here.
Yeah, I mean, like I was telling you prior, I mean, I'm essentially an expert at this point. I'll probably be writing a book on the secrets of marriage 3 weeks in. So we've got it all figured out here. It is great to be back on the airwaves, and congrats to our producer tonight, who's off air, Richie, bringing a new Hornets fan into this earthly realm. So lots of life changes here at BuzzBeat, but we're still bringing you hard-hitting Hornets content, and that's
marriage, children, and the return of Hornets basketball. I mean, really, what more could you want? But no, like, again, congratulations in all seriousness. Congratulations to you and your wife, Lee, and congratulations to the Randall family, both Richie and Paige. Welcoming in now there's two little Hornets fans in that family, so very, very cool to see. And for those listening in who can't tell already, I am playing sick tonight. I'm a little under the weather, but if you will just bear with my voice sounding a little worse than usual, I would appreciate the patience.
You're giving us a flu game tonight, BG.
Not quite, but you might be carrying me like Pippin here out of the chat room here at the end of the night, Lee. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. Again, these are going to be just some over-unders. I don't think any of these are like necessarily official sort of like Vegas lines, including like sort of the win total stuff we're going to get into. We adjusted some of these and kind of came up with some of these numbers on our own. But for the first one, the first over-under for today's episode, we're talking about standing or sort of like place in the Eastern Conference. We're going with 12.5, with the over being better, like, 11, 10, 9, maybe even 8 or 6, 7 if you think they're going to end up in the playoff, safely in the playoff race, and with only what would only be the 2 spots, or I guess 3 spots, forgive me, 13, 14, and 15 being the under. So Lee, do you see the Hornets finishing 12.5 or better in terms of Eastern Conference standing?
Yeah, so I think this might be, like you said, I think it might be a mix of Vegas lines and Richie lines, but which we like, add a little spice. I think this is like the right over under. I think 12.5 is probably where it should be. Like, you look at the East and it's kind of like, I don't know, I'm kind of grouping it as like a group of 7 at the top: Boston, Milwaukee, Philly, Cleveland, New York Knicks, Miami, Atlanta. And then there's like that kind of Toronto, Brooklyn, 8 and 9, which is like little less certain, but maybe like a step above this kind of 10 to 13 group, Orlando, Indiana, Chicago, Charlotte, and then you've got like Detroit, Washington kind of in the cellar, at least in my opinion. I'm going to be optimistic, BG. I'm going to actually take the I guess well, okay, if I'm saying the Hornets are going to finish 10th, am I taking the over? I'm taking the over better. So
Yep.
I like, I don't know, there's part of me that's like, this is the same team that made the play in 2 years ago, plus Mark Williams, plus Brandon Miller, plus hopefully a healthy LaMelo Ball. So obviously we've kind of ad nauseum talked about, PJ's back, Bridges is back. I like the Hornets to have kind of a bounce back season and like just by the skin of their teeth make the play-in game.
It is nice that they do have a few guys on this roster that seem like they're going to improve. LaMelo, Mark, not just the health, like he's still getting better as a player.
Yeah, 100%.
Mark Williams, PJ Washington still just turned 24 like a month ago or 6 weeks ago or so. So like conceivably, and he showed new stuff, I think, in terms of his game. Granted, he was maybe forced into a slightly different role last season, but just a lot of guys in the roster that theoretically should still be like on the upswing of their careers that are also like in the rotation. I think you can look about this from the other angle. It's like of the 15 teams in the Eastern Conference, that two of them are like early. I certainly like one of them is definitely gonna be bad with the Wizards. Like I think you can feel pretty safe about that. And if you're looking at the over under from that, well then all of a sudden you're only leaving there's only two slots. There's 13 or 14. And I guess you could be expecting the Pistons to make a jump this season too. I mean, they've got so many talented young players and a guy like Cade Cunningham, who if he comes back healthy, looks ripe for a breakthrough season, or maybe he even sort of like makes an early All-Star push with his third year in the league. He certainly played great ball for the select team ahead of the FIBA World Cup this summer. And again, plenty of other young guys on that roster with Ivy and Jalen Duren. So there's a lot of talent there. But my guess would be the Hornets probably like a little bit further along in whatever their progression is, and with Steve Clifford sort of like ringing, every defensive stop, every defensive rebound, every win that he can out of this roster. I'm not speaking in terms of like long-term upside, who's better poised for like the long term, thing like that. If we're focusing just on the 23-24 season, you got to think the Hornets probably have like a relatively noticeable edge over the Pistons. So once you get to that point, I mean, like it would not surprise me if the Hornets finish 13th in the East, in which case like that would put them on the under. But I'm going to take the over simply for the fact that there's just a little bit more like room vertically if you're thinking about it along and moving up the standings. Just there's going to be one or two teams that's going to deal with big injuries. There's going to be one or two teams that have to trade a player, and who knows? Like that could be. We'll see what Toronto ends up doing with Siakam.
It could be sellers,
or Anunoby, and so it's like I don't know. You could just see things. Again, the Bulls strike me as a team that's going to try to like push, for a playoff spot with a veteran laden team. But maybe they get to a point this season where they feel like, okay, we've got to try to move, DeMar or Zach, if you could actually, construct the trade around Zach LaVine or something along those lines. So I will take the over, but it is close. It's really, really close. And for this to work for Charlotte, again, LaMelo's got to play a full season. He's got to take a step. You've got to get, I don't know, 50, 60 games out of Gordon Hayward. Mark Williams is going to make a step and solidify himself as the starting center. And PJ has a big year. And maybe even Terry with sort of like a more stability in the backcourt with healthy LaMelo. Like he kind of regains his like shooting footing while getting to kind of like dial back to being more of a movement, come off screen guy than a guy who was really being relied upon for secondary or at times primary creation last season, depending on who was healthy and lineup combinations and stuff like that. But I think with a guy like Williams anchoring the defense, and seeing some of the strides that Charlotte made defensively the last 2 months of the season or so, whether that was real or not, I guess we're gonna find out pretty soon. And so I will say over for 12 and a half in the Eastern Conference for the Hornets as well. But I do think it could be. I do think it could be kind of close.
The
So
optimists are in the building. Let's go.
yeah, yes, 12th place, baby. Let's
Yeah, yeah.
here we go. Okay, so the next over under that we are looking for this season. Just give me a second. Let me pull up the doc. All right, something that will be tied pretty closely to their place in the Eastern Conference, which are going to be their number of wins they have this season. Now, this is a number. The number we're going to be working off of tonight is, I believe, something that Richie came up with, which
Richie
is 30.
line.
Yeah, this is not a Vegas line. This is a Richie Vegas line, not a Las Vegas line. This is 35.5 wins. One of the Vegas numbers I'm looking at has the Hornets over under win totals. I'm seeing 30 and a half, 31 and a half. So would be a few games lower than what Richie is flashing up here. I kind of think this is a fair number too. I don't know, Lee. Why don't you start us off? How do you
Yeah.
think the Hornets end up here?
Yeah, so I see Regulator in the chat. 41 wins was good for 10th in the East last year, which is where I've got the Hornets this year. With my kind of preseason hope and optimism burning bright as is tradition. And so I'll go over 35.5 wins. I'll even give you, I think it's a 40 and 42 year for the Charlotte Hornets.
Ooh.
And that they sneak into that 10th spot. I think they won 41 games 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. I'll check that while you're giving your pick, BG.
Yeah, I think this is a great number because I think it's going to be pretty close. Like if you were giving me the Vegas over under at 30 and a half, 31 and a half, I would pretty convincingly hit the over there.
Yeah, that does seem a little low, but I mean, I guess they're just banking on kind of more of the same from last year.
And I mean, we shouldn't be surprised if it does happen. I mean, this is all
No.
being held together in a pretty, rather. There's not a ton of margin for error for this team.
Correct.
And you're still banking on good health, as is everyone, and certainly the development of some pretty key players, if not potential star players on this roster. So, man, 35 and a half.
Hey, by the way, I stand corrected. That was actually a 43 win season two years ago when they had that top 10 offense.
Yeah, man, it feels a lot longer.
It feels like a long time ago.
2 seasons ago. Well, since I had them go over 12 and a half in the East, I don't want to do this thing where I have them go over 12 and a half and then under 35 and a half wins. So I feel like I've pinned myself into the corner because I was definitely ready to come on here and say under 35 and a half wins, but I'll go at, I'll flip flop here and I'll have them going over, but pretty slightly. I don't think they're like a 500 team. I probably would put them somewhere between 36 and the 40 or the 41 that you mentioned a second ago, Lee. So, but yeah, the optimism continues here. It's hard to believe this is a Hornets podcast. I guess we have not been beaten down yet by the impending doom of the rain.
We're ready to be hurt. We're ready to be hurt again.
Yeah, clearly that is the case.
And I'm sure fans have tried to forget, but we won 27 games last season.
Oh man, that honestly feels like that feels high, just because but I guess they did. They closed the season playing decent ball. NBA is always obviously weird, like late March, early April, but that's really when they played some of their best basketball of the season, even while missing some key guys here. But all right, let's go ahead and keep this thing moving along. Obviously, the 23-24 NBA season will be the first year of the in-season tournament. I believe Richie and I did a pod on this. On the in-season tournament a few months ago, when sort of some of the other key details were announced, earlier in the spring or summer, a few months ago. But if you don't remember, the Hornets are in East Group B, and they play against Milwaukee, Miami, Washington, and New York. So 4 games against those teams. So the over/under we're looking at for this is 1.5 group stage wins for the Hornets in East Group B play for the inaugural in-season NBA tournament. Lee, what say you?
So I think my optimism is going to stop here. I am kind of excited about this. Like, it's going to give like a random night. It's going to give a few random nights in the season. It's going to give us a little bit more of a reason to jump on a post game pod or to break down some analysis about if the Hornets win this game and Miami loses that game, we can I am kind of excited about the in-season tournament. I'm going to go under here, though, which means I guess my prediction is they're probably maybe only going to beat Washington. And I guess I'm still, as much as we say we're ready to be hurt again, I think I'm still traumatically scarred from our 2 play-in tournament experiences with this kind of iteration of the Hornets. So I
Yeah.
guess I'm pessimistic on their ability to kind of win games that quote unquote matter. I mean, I guess to be fair, it's still kind of yet to be seen how seriously some of the top teams will take the in-season tournament. So maybe there's an angle here to say that like actually some of the lower standing teams it'll mean a little bit more to them than it does some contenders like Milwaukee and Miami, but I'm still going to take the under on this one and say the Hornets go 1-3 in Group B.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty standard math. My guess is most people listening to this, most people who follow the team would probably go a pretty similar route. You're probably chalking up Milwaukee as a loss as the Bucks look to be one of the best teams in the league, and very excited to see what Giannis and Dame Lillard look like next to one another. I know Miami has had kind of a tough offseason. Like, they did not acquire Damian Lillard in trade. They watched Max Strus walk out the door. They watched Gabe Vincent walk out the door. Like, starters, very key rotation guys from their run to the surprising run to the finals this past year. Just going to be very reliant on aging Jimmy Butler to continue to drive offense, and he's awesome. And obviously Bam is incredible and a guy that you can use as a hub. And, on some nights he's, arguably the best defender in the world too. Very, very, very good player. But even with sort of a lackluster offseason, I just do think like there's enough firepower there. Plus Spoelstra, like Miami, still going to be a really tough team to play against. And then New York looks like they're going to be pretty darn good. And maybe New York makes a splash move, they certainly have stuff that they can trade. They've got a ton of picks. They've got some good young players. But even sort of like if they just keep their roster where it is, they look to be a team that's going to be really tough in the Eastern Conference. So I'll go under, and kind of go the same route as you, 1-3 for group play in the first in-season tournament. All right, we'll keep this thing moving here. Next topic, we're going to start with the rookie, the number 2 overall pick in the 2023 draft. That would be Brandon Miller. Lee, how about this over-under? I'm going to hit you with 20 minutes per game in terms of average, over-under for Brandon Miller. Does he average more than 20 minutes per game during his rookie season?
This is an interesting one, actually. Like, I feel like there's a few factors here. The first factor against Brandon Miller is like Clifford is just, doesn't exactly have the greatest track record with playing rookies. So there is that. I mean, Hornets fans, anguished for some time to see more Mark Williams, and that did not happen until Steve Clifford's hand was forced with the trading of Mason Plumlee. So there is kind of that grizzled vet Steve Clifford factor. There's also the how much Gordon Hayward will we get from a health standpoint factor. Like, if Hayward's healthy, I still feel like, I mean, we've talked about that a ton on this podcast. Like, he's still a very effective player when healthy and would likely, again, a coach like Clifford is just going to play Gordon Hayward if he's available. So, that being said, Oubre's gone. McDaniels is gone. So there are wing minutes out there. But of course, Bridges is back. So all that to say, I'm going to take the over, but just slightly. And I don't think this is like as much of a slam dunk as bettors might think. I mean, look back just one season ago, Mark Williams averaged 19.3 minutes per game as a rookie. So that's right on that line.
Yeah, you listed some good points there, and definitely some wise to start with. Steve Clifford maybe being a little less freewheeling with his sort of just like giving minutes to a rookie right away. And Charlotte is obviously a team that's trying to make the playoffs next season, whether that's like good, bad, or prudent or whatever. And the wing room is pretty crowded. Like at full strength, the wing room is crowded, especially if you factor, what are you going to get out of not just Gordon Hayward, but Cody Martin this season too. Where do PJ's minutes come? It's like with him playing very little five, not like he's really playing any three or any, not like he played much three last season either. But with Bridges back, it's like you have a lot of like options, I guess is what I'm saying. But if you're going to pigeonhole PJ into really just being like almost a full-time four, say for certain lineups or situations or whatever, then there's just like a little less room in that to that 2, 3, 4, range for Miller to crack in. What I will say though is, I think this is ultimately why I'm going to end up taking the over. One, hopefully Miller's good. I mean, yeah, like he's good. Yeah. And then the other thing too, I kind of like if he doesn't, it doesn't necessarily need to be like a crisis or anything like that. But Lee, one of the pitches, as much as I didn't like this being part of the pitch for Miller as the number 2 pick, was he can help them win games next season. Like he's older and you can play him more easily next to LaMelo and blah blah blah. Something that I was really not thrilled about. That was not just coming from like people covering the team or talking about the team, but something that was literally coming from within the front office, from within the draft room this season. So if Miller doesn't play 20 minutes per game, as an not like an older rookie, because he's still relatively very young player. He's still going to be getting better for a while, but just I don't know. Not like I could see a mandate or anything like that where you've got to play this guy X number of minutes per game, but just I could definitely see there being some pressure to get him in the rotation. As much as any number 2 pick, I guess that's not like, a pure project or whatever. So
yeah, it's almost like if he's under 20 a game, like did something go wrong with his performance or development? Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair.
Yeah, and again, I think you can build a case for either side of this line because again, he's a rookie. This team's trying to win, and again, there's a lot of guys that 2, 3, 4. Are not just like, I mean, some of them are pretty darn good players, but it's just like a lot of vets too. Like, especially if you want to like include guys like, Neela Keener or Ed Sumner, as like, and granted, these are not guys you want to like think about playing above the number 2 pick, but they're like guys you could see Steve Clifford also being fond of, for their effort and for their defense. So, but I'll go slightly over for Miller. Okay, here we go. This looks like one that Richie may have changed on us here last second, actually.
Live adjustments.
Or within the last few minutes. So got a curveball there from Richie. And speaking of curveballs, Richie, I hope your Atlanta Braves are doing a little bit better than they were when we started recording this here tonight. But the line we were looking at in terms of over-under, initially this was set at 24.5 points per game for LaMelo Ball. It's been moved down to, and this is the one we're going to work off of, 23.5 points per game for LaMelo Ball this season. Keep in mind, last year in I guess 36 games, 23.3 points per game. So this would be, I guess just in terms of a box score number and average. This LaMelo basically essentially stay around the same with like a modest increase this season. I'll go ahead and jump in on this one here. I think it's going to be under, but I think he's going to play way better. Like I obviously, you want LaMelo to be a big time scorer. He's going to be taking a ton of threes. You'd love to see some type of uptick with him getting to the line more. But my hope would be that the 30% usage rate that he had last season, like that's just got to come down some. And I think ultimately that you want it to come down because for him, it's going to always have to be a blend. Like he can't just, I don't think he can just be like the apex, Luka Doncic, just like absolutely, this guy's just going to run every pick and roll every time down the court and get into the lane and just like, detonate your defense like that. For LaMelo, you probably like to see the assist, the playmaking jump a little bit, along with his just overall like shooting efficiency. He's a great shooter, obviously, in a bunch of different capacities, whether it's catch and shoot, free throws, runners. Like he's really talented, really good touch, really high skilled player. And certainly like with a guy like Bridges back, it's weird because for one, Bridges will probably, some of the usage will divert to him. So maybe LaMelo is seeing less possessions, but with a guy like that to be a pressure point on the rim, I mean, maybe LaMelo's getting more catch and shoots or he's getting more closeouts to attack or what have you. So I will say under for LaMelo. I would have felt a little bit more confident if we were still going with that original 24.5 points per game number. But even with it being bumped down to 23.5, I'll still go under. Not by a ton. I still think he's going to be above 20 points per game guy, but with less usage, more efficiency, but under 23.5 points per game for LaMelo Ball this season. Lee, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very fair point to kind of adjust LaMelo's scoring statistics from last year based on the fact that he had to carry so much load last season with Bridges out, Martin barely played, Hayward was in and out of the lineup, So, but I'm actually going to go over here. I'm gonna say LaMelo averages 24.5 this season. Obviously, he was at basically 23.3 last season in a year where he did have to kind of jack. He still shot 37% from three. Still shot, we've talked about his off the dribble shooting, all that type of stuff. Really has become one of the elite like long range bombers in the NBA, which is such a kind of ironic thing to happen based on, pre-draft analysis and all that good stuff. But anyways, I'm building a case here for LaMelo to go over on this, for the Hornets to again have like a top, maybe not a top 10, but a top. Well, I'll save that one. Because we're gonna get to it. But I'm building a case here. BG. I'm going over massive LaMelo year.
Yeah, again, he's in a much better position than he was a season ago, which maybe isn't saying much because the context almost couldn't have been worse than it was. And that's even before the health issues played a role. He was dealt a pretty bad hand before last season. And no, I mean, I think like there's with Williams back, a guy that he can run pick and roll with. Again, if he's healthy, you let Terry settles more into that movement shooter route. You get back to some of those guard, screening actions, the pistol sets, the ghost screens, all of that stuff that was definitely like a part of it last season. But when they were a top 6 offense under James Borrego was like a huge piece of the puzzle. And it felt like they not like they got away from it last season. They just couldn't really get to it because of health and roles sort of shifting around. And, it's tough for rookies to come in and be an impact player, but if Miller shows up and he can be a guy that can give them some movement shooting and a guy that you can use in those guard-to-guard actions with LaMelo as well. And PJ makes strides. All of a sudden, you just like you can play 4-round-1 basketball with LaMelo, Mark Williams pick and roll, and like that should theoretically lead to a lot of good stuff one way or the other. And if LaMelo shoots it well and gets to the line a little bit more frequently, well then yeah, maybe he does get himself to 24 and a half points per game with a bunch of assists on good efficiency. It would be awesome if that happened. I'm just like a little skeptical of like the usage being there. Okay, let's move along here. Something you were sort of just teasing at ever so wonderfully there a second ago, Lee. We're now looking at offense for the Hornets. Over under, is this a top 15 offense in the NBA? Keep in mind they finished last season 30th out of 30 teams in offensive efficiency according to Cleaning the Glass.
Yeah. So again, I'm building my case here for a huge LaMelo year, for a little bit of a bounce back Hornets season. I cannot blame people for forgetting that they won 43 games 2 years ago. It feels like a decade ago. It feels like a decade ago they had a top, like you said, top 6 offense under Borrego, and Miles Bridges was actually the leading scorer that season. LaMelo just under him at like 20.4 points per game or something like that. So I'm building the case for a huge LaMelo season, for the Hornets to again kind of be in that top 10 to 12 offensive range. And if Clifford can kind of keep the floor of the defense hopefully a little higher than years past, that they could approach 500 record. Look, hey, it's preseason, BG. I'm feeling the love,
man. All right, so I'm with you on some of this stuff. Excuse me. Sorry. Again, a little under the weather tonight, so
He's
bear
playing
with me
through
here.
it, boys. He's
playing
through
it. I think this is the sales pitch. With Bridges back and with Mark Williams taking on a more central role with his size, the lob catching, the screen setting, they should definitely be able to generate more rim pressure this season, which helps. And that was something that they were very good at with James Borrego, and certainly Bridges being a big portion of that, and something that kind of dropped for them last season. Also during the 22-23 season, only 1.04 points per possession after an opponent made shot. So, more than likely like a half court type possession. That was worse than the NBA. And I think with an improved defense, which is something they showed signs of life during the back third of the season. And again, for whatever it's worth, this is only like a 19, 20 game sample, but they were a top 8 to 10 defense over the last 2 months of the year, like starting March 1st through basically like, the first or second week of April. They were 8th in the NBA in defensive efficiency. So, late season numbers can be like a little wonky. But I think with an improved defense, you can get into a little bit more transition, hopefully, whether it's steals or Mark Williams blocks that are like igniting stuff, and LaMelo is certainly dynamic. And you think with having Miller, Bridges, that they should have sort of like more stuff to offer in terms of like athletic wings filling the lane next season. So I think that's the pitch, but I'm still worried about the half court offense. And I'm still worried about what the second unit offense looks like, depending on how health plays out, depending how the rotations shake out. So I'm going to go under, actually, for a top 15 offense. I just don't quite see this being a team that creates like enough transition to really like use those sort of like transition chaos things to like, I guess, sort of raise the ceiling. And I just don't think they're going to be quite good enough in the half court to set like an amazing floor. So I'll say under, but like they're not going to be the worst offense in the NBA, and if they jump to being the 19th or 20th offense in the league this season, like, that would be, I guess, impressive. But certainly would still have
improvement.
It would be a big improvement, but I'm still going to go under. I kind of think they finish like middle of the pack in you're a middle of the pack or like a little under middle of the pack in like both sort of like offensive and defensive efficiency metrics. I mean, this is not an over under, but like where do you think that the defense could settle in this season? Like, and just real quickly in terms of like overall finish in the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think the optimistic range would. I can't imagine the defense being better than like 18th. I feel like
Yeah.
that's like almost league average would be as. Although, granted, I mean, if you buy into like a big Mark Williams jump and the rim protection and PJ and Bridges being back, and but I don't think the personnel is there still for like even Clifford's wizardry and getting kind of squeezing every little drop out of this team as he does, as a coach. I mean, there are certainly viable criticisms of Clifford, but one thing he does do is manufacture effort from professional basketball players.
Yeah.
So I would think the highest is 18, and I would imagine it's more in that like 20 to 22 range for the overall defense. But I'd love to be wrong. I'd love for it to be a league average or above defense.
Yeah, and we'll just see, like, right now, especially with Cody Martin hurt, just sort of like where the wing and guard, defense lands, where the screen navigation is, with guys like LaMelo and Rozier. Obviously, with Sumner, and with Ntilikina, they've got guys that they've got some guys who can defend in the guard room. And Sumner looks like a guy that could play off LaMelo and shoot it a little bit. I kind of like that addition, honestly, by the Hornets. I thought that was like a decent move for what it is, I guess. And I do think, like, I mean, you were sort of talking about Steve Clifford habits. Williams obviously has a ton of upside as a defender, as we saw with him as a prospect, as a prep, and certainly his 2 seasons at Duke. But I thought also just like his habits, JT Thor habits late last season, getting to play for Cliff. Like, Thor's another one of those guys that, like, maybe you could also see him chewing into some of Brandon Miller's minutes a little bit. Like, if he shoots it and continues to, like, be a good team defender and rebound and stuff like that. So, again, I see them being like better over defensively, not as good as they were the last 2 months of the season, but again, still sort of being like kind of around league average there. Even with Steve Clifford and Mark Williams like kind of doing their damnedest to prop it up. Okay, next over under. Here we go. This one I think is an easy one to sort of like think about a little bit. Number of all-stars on the roster for the Hornets next season, 0.5. So this question really is like, do you think LaMelo
is there an all-star?
Do you think LaMelo Ball is going to make the 2024 All-Star game? Like, he's the one chance on the roster, I think, pretty clearly. So I'll just go ahead and answer. I will take the over with LaMelo.
Yeah.
I fully realize that, like, it's not going to be easy. The East is loaded in the guard room. Even with Kyrie Irving now in Dallas, you still got Donovan Mitchell, Jaylen Brown, DeMar DeRozan, Tyrese Halliburton. Like, those guys were all-stars last season. Garland, who didn't make the all-star last year but was 2 seasons ago. Now you've got Damian Lillard in the Eastern Conference. Drew Holiday gets moved, but he's still in Boston. And then along with that, you've got Trae Young. Currently,
did you say Halliburton already too?
Yeah, I said Hall. You got to have Hallie in there. You've got Jalen Brunson, who didn't make was like a very good sort of like sub all-star last year. Very good player. Didn't play great for Team USA in the World Cup, but was solid for the was awesome for New York last season. And you still have James Harden too. Chortle if you want, but he was basically at an all-star level last year too. So it's crowded in the backcourt.
You did lose Beal and you did lose Van Fleet, but it's still loaded. It's
still loaded. Adding Dame is tough because it's just like
Dame too. Yeah, good point.
He's just almost he's just like a lock for it. Mitchell's probably a lock for it. Like, Garland probably should have been one last season. He's so freaking good. But look, it's just fun to pick LaMelo and say
exactly
do it. He's I believe he would be the youngest of this group. 2020 draft. I know Halliburton's the one other guy from that draft class in here, but he's like 18 months older than LaMelo. I guess you could say, like we talked about Cade Cunningham briefly, like maybe he's make a jump and this gets even more crowded. The main thing is that LaMelo plays at like an all-star level. He's very popular, so he'll have lots of like votes, But the main thing for the Hornets and moving forward is that like this guy, is able to play at that type of level and be in this kind of conversation. So for that purposes, and for sort of like the sake of the team and for wanting to pull for LaMelo, I'll say he's going to make an All-Star roster for the second time, even in a stacked Eastern Conference, and the Hornets will hit the over in terms of All-Stars this season.
I was gonna say you mentioned it right before I was going to. He's done it before, So this would be his second cap if he was able to do it. So yeah, I'm with you, BG. I'm gonna go LaMelo Ball All-Star. So that's just me building my case. Play-in appearance, 40 wins, top 15 offense, LaMelo Ball All-Star appearance. Just like play this back to me in like 3 months and just be like, look at you, you fool.
This could look bad. This could look bad. I think. I mean, some of the stuff I've said could also look like, I think, equally ridiculous. But because I have gone with a slightly more of a downer approach, I think I've probably saved myself some of the high end
or realistic approach. Depends on how you look at it.
Fair. Sometimes they're one and the same. Here. But all right, we're going to finish this up with a rapid fire segment. Lee, I believe these were some of the over-unders you dropped in earlier this afternoon. So real quickly, let's go ahead and just hop into it. We're looking at, I guess, player versus player over-unders. Lee, do you want to go ahead and tease these up too, and we can answer them?
Yeah, so basically we're pitting 2 players against each other in a category. So technically not an over-under, but we're giving our opinion on whether. So this category is more total minutes.
Mm-hmm.
One often injured player and one player that was kind of injured for the first time last year, but felt like he was hurt all year. So who plays more total minutes this year, BG? Cody Martin or Gordon Hayward?
Yeah, I'm just a little worried about Cody Martin health-wise. Man, I hope he's okay. I'm glad he got paid before his body has sort of started to fail him a little bit the last 12 months or so. For a guy who plays very, very hard, I'm gonna go Gordon Hayward, which is not like, I mean, this is a tough one for sure, but I'll go Hayward because I just think right now it's hard to believe, but even with him being older, he's a little more durable than Cody Martin at the moment. So I'll go Gordon Hayward for more total minutes this season.
Golly, you forget some of these things when you have a summer to kind of like block it out of your memory to some degree. But like, man, Cody only appeared in 7 games last season. That is, I mean, he essentially missed a year. As hurt as it feels like Hayward is every other week, he played 50 games last year. So
yeah,
I think you're right, and I think it's depressing that you're right. But I think, like you said, I mean, again, like you said, props to Cody for getting paid. He earned it, and he deserved that second contract. And man, I hope he can get on the floor this year. But I think you're right. I think you got to go Gordon at this point.
Yeah. Again, I mean, maybe it's a little foolish to think Cody's gonna play, anywhere close to that few games again this season. And if that's the case, then Hayward, who's a guy that you can pretty reliably count on missing, significant double-digit games per season, maybe Cody's a safer bet. But right now, just without Wesley still dealing with injuries, as a lot of the Hornets are actually in the preseason. I'm just gonna go. I'll go Gordon Hayward, but I'm hoping Cody can stay healthy, play good for the Hornets.
All right. So next one, we're going with a little bit more of a fun one. We're going. The category is more total double doubles. So which of these 2 players will wrangle more double doubles throughout the season? LaMelo Ball or Mark Williams?
It's an interesting one because it does feel like Williams, if he's able to like step into that full-time center role, like he just should be a double-double machine. Like assuming health and the minutes are there. For Williams, just for context, last season per 36 per 36 minutes, Mark Williams, 13.2 rebounds per 36 minutes, 12% offensive rebound rate, 28% defensive rebound rate. These are monster numbers. And as Richie and I were sort of talking about a few weeks ago, like you can't just like prorate it and be like, oh, he's going to play 10 more minutes per game, so let's just like prorate these out, right on the numbers like that. But he has, across a variety of different levels, Mark Williams has popped as like an elite rebounder. And so it's pretty bankable, and something you're not like necessarily like, obviously relying on missed shots and stuff like that. But you can be a little more like, I guess, enterprising and individualistic with it. So I'm for more total double doubles. Oh man, I'll go Williams, but like, I could also see Steve Clifford being like, I'm going to start Nick Richards, and and all of a sudden LaMelo, averages a double double, and I look like an idiot. So I'm ready for that, but I'll say Mark Williams with more total double doubles this season.
Yeah, I mean, look, in support of your pick here, like this dude ended the season like, I mean, like like 95 Shaq or something. I mean, he closed the year out with 4 of his last 5 games, double doubles. There was a 16 rebound game in there. He had a 20 rebound game in March last season, or actually in February last season. Like the back third of this season, Mark Williams was a monster. Like if there's one like storyline that I am like theoretically betting on this year, is that everyone starts to realize like, oh man, this guy is like very easily a top half starting center in the NBA already. And so, but I'll actually take the other side. And really the only reason I think I take the other side of this is because LaMelo can get it in 2 different ways, whereas Mark can only get it in 1. So like LaMelo can go points and assists, or he can go points and rebounds. Where
yeah,
yeah, and like there
point.
might even be games where Mark Williams goes like 17 rebounds but only scores 9 points or something. But I mean, if you look at his last like 10 box scores of the season, you might make the same guess BG did. So
yeah, that's a great point, and it really probably should be like the difference maker, which is that LaMelo's a pretty impressive rebounder too, and that like, yeah, he can slice you up like that in a few different ways, and really be a guy that can collect a bunch of different statistics. So yeah, if I could, I'll say Williams, but if I could amend it,
no amending, BG.
Yeah, no,
amending.
It's locked in.
All right, last one here. Before we get out of here, more total starts. Brandon Miller versus PJ Washington. And I think like at a first glance, the knee jerk might be PJ, and maybe it is PJ, but I think it's interesting because of the position that Steve Clifford seems to want to play PJ, and because like we've already talked about kind of the crowded wing room. So there is a world in where PJ like kind of becomes the everyday 6th man, and where Brandon Miller like starts the season hot and is just knocking down all kinds of shots with LaMelo giving him space to do so. So I don't know. Do you have any strong opinion here on this one, BG?
Not like not overwhelmingly strong, but I do feel pretty confident in PJ starting more games this season. He was kind of an Iron Man for them a year ago, with 73 games, 73 starts. And I think a couple of those games he didn't play towards the end of the season were just sort of like, they were trying to let some of the young guys play a little bit more. So you're absolutely right though to point out that there's a couple ways that Steve Clifford could, sort of like toggle the rotations a little bit this season. Of course, Miles Bridges is going to be suspended for the first to start the year. But I kind of like, my sort of hope for the team is that they settle in with like a starting 5 of LaMelo, Rozier, Bridges, PJ, and Mark Williams, that like Hayward sort of slots into like being the guy that can, lead a second unit offense. And if that's the case, then I would obviously feel very confident about PJ, being a guy that's going to start a lot of games. But you could certainly see, PJ starting the year as the starting 4, and then shifting to a permanent bench role, I think he'd be very good. Like you could move him. Luckily with PJ, you could move him around, right? Like
Yep.
he can kind of do all of this stuff. He's again very useful, very good young player to have on this team. And the Hornets have him on a pretty team friendly contract, at least at the moment. So I'll say PJ to get more starts and feel relatively confident about that one. Did you forgive me? Did you submit an answer to this one?
No, but I agree with you. I think, like you said, Clifford could toggle the lineup in a way that it could end up being Miller, but I think the favorite would be PJ on this one.
Yeah, I think he's got to be. I think he matters a lot to them as like a team defender, a floor spacer, a ball mover, a guy that can. I really believe in PJ's ability to like connect stuff between LaMelo and Mark Williams, like as a short roll guy with making plays with Mark Williams in the dunker spot, or doing pick and pop with LaMelo. PJ catches it against the bent defense, closeout comes. PJ drives, and then help comes, and he's lobbing it to Mark Williams. I just see him being like a connective piece. I think Hayward has that ability as well too. So just I think, but again, I see him being an important player for this team on both sides of the floor because he's a good help defender. He can switch, he can shoot, he moves the ball. So without further ado, I believe we have come to the end of the list here. Hope you guys listening in enjoyed some of the stuff we went through. We appreciate those who chimed in along in the comments. So thanks again for joining us. As always, please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure to review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere and everywhere. Again, we really, really appreciate those positive reviews. They're nice to read. And they certainly help us out in terms of algorithm type things. Lastly, make sure to visit buzzbeat.substack.com for information about our private podcast feed, where, of course, you'll get early access to episodes, typically multiple hours ahead of the public feed. Sometimes it's a little more than that, and also get ad-free episodes. So, again, with the season coming up, I know there's a lot of real-life stuff going on with everyone involved in the podcast, but it's time to get cranked back up for a season, and there's going to be a lot of great content coming to the podcast and to the Substack page. So please subscribe and ride along with us for the 23-24 season. Thanks again for the continued support. We'll see you guys next time.